This is Eric Savitz from Forbes. I'm at the Economy Conference. I'm talking to Steve Hasker, who runs the global media business at Nielsen. Steve and I were just on a panel talking about the Fantastic Four, not the comic book heroes, not the Fab Four, but actually the four most dominant players in the internet economy: Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon.
The conversation we had, Eric, I think was a fascinating one. It was about who in the end owns the consumer experience inside and outside of the home. And at Nielsen, we're obviously very focused on video because of our measurement business. It is by far and away the lion's share of media and entertainment time spent in the US and in most countries across the world, firstly. Secondly, it's the most compelling vehicle for advertisers, and it has been for many, many years. And that hasn't changed as the world has gone cross-platform.
So we're talking about a market that's sizable for us.
Well, in the US, it's the television business here is $80 billion a year in advertising revenue, and then another order of magnitude on that in terms of the subscription side of it as well.
There's all kinds of attempts to get at that, to carve away a slice of that for online. And you see with all the players. Are we going to get to a point where one of these guys, or maybe more than one, becomes a more meaningful threat to the established players in the video business? It's
really cross-platform video that we're talking about. So whatever the experience is, it needs to be seamlessly integrated with the other forms of video distribution. Whatever Amazon, Google, the other players offer, it has to be integrated with that. Firstly. Secondly, you've got to look at the killer content. So what is the content that gets consumers to change their behavior or stick with the same kinds of programs? And that tends to be the professionally produced marquee content that comes out of the broadcast networks, comes out of the film studios, comes out of the cable networks, and the sports leagues. And so one of the questions that we look at is who owns the rights to that content, and how will that move over time, and how are the different players positioning themselves to work with the producers and owners of those rights, content of those rights, rather than against them. We come into this with an assumption that there's going to be one player that controls the entire ecosystem. And I think today the consumer is tolerant of multiple sources of video content, and it's probably a fair bet to assume that they will be going forward as well.
There's been multiple attempts to insert some sort of online video into the living room experience, and yet it still does not feel like a mainstream behavior.
Television, up until now, has been a lean-back experience. People flop onto the couch, onto the sofa after a hard day at work, or relaxing and out with friends, and they want to be entertained. They don't want to have to go to work to discover new programs. One of the issues is how can you make that experience seamless and continue to have it be a very relaxing experience. The second problem is a business model question, which is the multi-channel video providers today, so the satellite companies and the cable MSOs, have in a sense an advantage in getting into the home and subsidizing a box because they have an existing subscription revenue stream. The attackers, if that's what you'd like to call them, and the Fab Four as we're calling them here, don't have that advantage going into the game. So they need to figure out a way to subsidize that consumer purchase equipment in the home, whether it's tethered or not.
Is there any evidence that people are in fact cord cutting and moving their video experience to on-demand online models instead?
What we're starting to see is certainly some softening in the cable MSO and satellite subscription numbers. It's hard to know whether that is related to the economic climate or whether it's related to an increase in the alternatives elsewhere.
What do you think about Netflix's position, and do you think it's likely that maybe one of these players might make a run at them?
Yeah, I mean, Netflix have a couple of very interesting assets. Firstly, they have a big subscriber base of people who have proven to be pretty loyal to Netflix and like their service. The second is they have the relationships with the studios and the owners of the content. And thirdly, and maybe most importantly, they have a very rich database on what people like to consume. And they, I think, have been very clever about building that database and using it to better serve the consumer. So those three things taken together do provide, I think, a lot of value and are attractive to other players as they look at video as a very, very important part of the media and entertainment mix.
There's theory, I saw one analyst float that if one of these guys bid, that they all have to kind of make an attempt to buy Netflix.
It certainly wouldn't be the first time in the media business that had happened.
Right. How do you look at Hulu's positioning, and might they be sort of maybe a consolation prize for the the bidder for Netflix?
I think that they've built a very exciting consumer proposition. All of the content that they have access to and they're able to distribute is very compelling television content with a lighter ad load and ways in which they can make the ads more relevant to the particular consumer at that point in time. They're obviously very tightly tethered to a number of the networks, the television networks today. So that would certainly be the first place I'd look.
Let's talk a little bit about Microsoft. Are they quietly, sneakily becoming a much more relevant player in the living room? And how do you think about Microsoft's efforts in video?
Yeah, if you look at the Xbox platform and the number of the installed base and the size of that base, they're actually one of the largest, if not the largest, distributor. So equivalent to the largest cable MSOs and the largest satellite players. So they've definitely got a seat at the table here. We think that they'll be a major player in the distribution of video, and it's reflected in the investments that we've made in making sure that our ratings incorporate video that's consumed through an Xbox.